Okay. Hi,
Okay,
Elise.
hello. Hello. All right, hello everyone, and welcome to Cousin Jonathan and Clyde, the Rocketman Big Book Study Podcast. We're just two sober alcoholics reading and studying the big book together, and we invite you to come and study with us. The way that Joe and Charlie used to do it back in the day. Let's start with a moment of silence, followed by the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Back in 1973, Joe McHugh introduced Charlie P. as an AA speaker at an Al Anon convention. Joe and Charlie soon discovered that they both had a very deep love for the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Traveling between their homes, they started discussing the book, and it became a regular event, and it is known worldwide today. Clyde and Jonathan met in the original Zoo Crew back in 2022, and we also discovered that we shared a love for the big book and enjoyed studying it together, the Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. So we kicked off this podcast. We meet here every Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time until 3:30. Please have your big book handy and read along. Even bring along a few pieces of paper and a pen to take some notes. Study with us. We'll be recording the audio of these studies as a podcast. You can go to our podcast at the Zoo Crew Podcast on YouTube. So the purpose of this big book study meeting is to help you when you're meeting with a prospect, now we call them sponsees, or just talking about sobriety in general. We want you to be armed with the facts about yourself and the AA program. You see, freedom from alcohol comes through taking the 12 steps and working with others. Page 15 of the 12 and 12 lets us know what the 12 steps are. The 12 steps are a group of principles, spiritual in nature, which, if practiced as a way of life, can expel the obsession to drink and enable a sufferer to become happily and usefully whole. How soon do you want to be happy, joyous, and free? We suggest that you purchase a copy of the big book for future use if you don't have one. You might want to underline, highlight, and even take notes as we all study together. Please order your AA literature directly from Alcoholics Anonymous so that the money goes to AA and to ensure that you get a good copy. See, here at the original Zoo Crew, we are not advocating that you rush through the steps. We highly suggest that you have a sense of urgency in taking the 12 steps and having them become a way of life sooner than later. Act as if this was a matter of life and death, because it actually is a matter of life and death. Once again, how soon do you want to be happy, joyous, and free? You can go to our website at thezoocrew.org to order a copy of the big book, as well as read it online. The big book is our basic text, and it contains a full recipe for recovery. It's impossible to find a loophole in the big book that excludes you from being a member of AA. So welcome to our podcast. I am Jonathan, and this is my partner, Clyde, and we're going to get started. And Clyde is just going to bring us up to speed on what we've read so far in this wonderful book.
Okay, thank you, cousin, and good afternoon. I'm an alcoholic. My name's Clyde, and we're reading through the doctor's opinion. We're studying the doctor's opinion, and last week we're almost done reading the doctor's opinion, studying this, and we're going to be moving on to Bill's story, but we're going to wrap things up here regarding what we read last week. What we found out in this chapter, what we've learned is that we have Dr. Silkworth has informed us that we have an obsession of the mind. We have a physical allergy, the phenomenon of craving. And so once we seek that ease and comfort, our mind tells us, I need a drink. I'm feeling irritable, discontent. I need some ease and comfort. I'll take a drink. My mind gets obsessed on that. And once I do that, this phenomenon of craving takes over and I can't stop. And he lets us know that the solution is that in nearly all cases, their ideals must be grounded in a power greater than themselves. And here's what he says on Roman numeral page 29. It's called a psychic change. This is the solution to our alcoholism problem, a psychic change. And it's also called, so he refers to it as, says, unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, there's very little hope of his recovery. Then it also says in the next paragraph, once a psychic change has occurred, the same person who seemed doomed can easily control his desire for alcohol. And then it's referred to again a little further down on the page. It says that something more than human power is needed to produce the essential psychic change. So that's what we're talking about here. We need a higher power to help us have an essential psychic change. And that's what the solution to alcoholism is. So, Dr. Silkworth, we're on page XXXI now, talks about his experience with a couple of cases. And the one we read last week is at the top of the page about this 1 year prior to this experience this man brought in. That was Hank P., Bill's right-hand man, and one of the guys that promoted the big book and got this thing off the ground. How he accepted the plan outlined in this book. And a year later, Dr. Silkworth didn't even recognize him. He looked so good. And so he went from trembling, despairing, nervous wreck to he emerged as a man brimming over with self-reliance and contentment. Okay. And now we're going to read about another case of Dr. Silkworth that gives him another mental uplift. So we're going to start there on page Roman numeral 31, the paragraph that says, when I need a mental uplift, I often think of another case brought in by a physician prominent in New York. The patient had made his own diagnosis and, deciding his situation hopeless, had hidden in a deserted barn, determined to die. He was rescued by a searching party and in desperate condition brought to me. So you got somebody that's pretty badly mangled here, suicidal. Following his physical rehabilitation, he had a talk with me in which he frankly stated he thought the treatment was a waste of effort unless I could assure him, which no one ever had, that in the future he would have the quote unquote willpower to resist the impulse to drink. So this guy is really hopeless. His alcoholic problem was so complex and his depression so great that we felt his only hope would be through what we then called moral psychology, and we doubted if even that would have any effect. So here's the good news, page 32, XXXII. However, he did become, quote unquote, sold on the ideas contained in this book. That's the 12 steps. He has not had a drink for a great many years. I see him now and then, and he is as fine a specimen of manhood as one could wish to meet. I earnestly advise every alcoholic to read this book through, and though perhaps he came to scoff, he may remain to pray. William D. Silkworth, MD. So, Cousin, you have any comments on what happens when we become sold on the ideas contained in this book or accept the plan outlined in this book?
Yes, I do have an idea what happens. We begin to change and we begin to recover, and that's for sure. And I just went to look up that word, moral psychology. What's that all about? And it says that it is the study of the moral identity development, or how people integrate moral ideas with development of their own character. Moral psychology differs from moral philosophy in that it studies how we make decisions. Wow. It studies how we make decisions in
Yeah.
order to change. Yeah. It helps our decision-making process, building of character. Okay. Yeah, just
Yes.
want to point that out.
In that word decision, what's popping into my head right now is the third step, cousin, where we made a decision to turn our will and our life over to the care of God as we understood him. So there's where that decision making comes in, that third step.
Yeah, and I believe that as alcoholics, that's what our life was. It was just a chain of bad decisions, one bad decision after another. The first bad decision was to drink, of course, and then all of these other ungreat ideas popped into our head, you know. So yeah, we needed to change that, and that's why we're here studying this book today. Alyssa, and let me get that right. That's Elise, right? Would you like to come in and say hello? Welcome to our podcast.
Hello. Yes, you got it right, Elise. I'm sorry, I had a minute trouble touching that mute button, but thank you so much for having me here today. Um, on the idea of moral psychology, I think that you hit it right on the head, that it is the decision making, and we have decisions every day that we have to make. And I know that I am so blessed to have the program. Today, I'm powerless over alcohol, and I'm also powerless over anxiety. So I'm just joining every meeting that I can. And I think it's my higher power that's giving me that urgency to make the right decision and guiding my intuition and decision making today. And for that, I'm thankful.
All right, cool. Melissa, you're also new to our podcast. Would you like to come in and say hello before we get started? We're really getting ready to take off now because we're going into Bill's story. So if anyone wants to come in and say hello, we welcome you.
Jaden, hello, everybody.
Okay. Where you calling in from?
I'm in Springfield, Ohio.
Okay, I'm in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and Clyde is in outside San Francisco, right?
No,
and
San
where
Diego.
You at? San Diego.
Wow.
Where are you at, Elise?
I'm outside. I'm outside of Atlanta, Georgia.
Oh, great. And Jaden, where are you at? You want to come in and say what's up since you're here before we get started?
Hey, I'm from Minnesota.
Minnesota, the great state. They call that the great state. So, hey, we got a nice mix here of different states and cities here. So let's go ahead and get going. Clyde, you want to start with the now we'll be studying this together. And hope you have your big books and stuff. Now, we're not here to teach. We're here to study this thing together. And the thing about it is, you may know something that I don't know. I might know something that Clyde doesn't know. Melissa might know something that Elise doesn't know. And that's how we make this thing work and make it interesting so that when other people listen, they can get something out of it. So, and we're really excited about Bill's story. This is something that me and Clyde have went over in the past a few times, and we really enjoy and love this story, you know. So let's you want me to start reading, Clyde, or you want to start?
It's up to you, cousin. I just want to point out that Bill's story is the first story. There's also in the back of the book 41 or 42 other stories. So there's a lot of stories, but Bill's is the one that kicks things off for our big book. And then Dr. Bob and the rest of them are in the back of the book. So this is the one story, personal story, that's included in the primary, first 164 pages. And so yeah, go ahead, and why don't you read for us, cousin?
Yeah, it's so much packed here, man. So chapter 1, Bill's story. That's page 1. War fever ran high in the New England town to which we new young officers from Plattsburgh were assigned. And we were flattered when the first citizens took us to their homes, making us feel heroic. Here was love, applause, war, moments sublime, with intervals of hilarious. I was a part of life at last. And in the midst of the excitement, I discovered liquor. I forgot the strong warning and prejudice of my people concerning drink. In time, we sailed for over there. I was very lonely and again turned to alcohol. We landed in England. I visited Winchester Cathedral. Much moved, I wandered outside. My attention caught a doggle scribble on an old tombstone. And it's read this: here lies a Hampshire grenadier who caught his death drinking cold small beer. A good soldier is near forgot whether he dies by musket or by pot. Wonder what that means. We had talked about that. Now, at the time, how old was Bill when he started drinking, Clyde?
Yeah, so Bill was born in 1895 in East Dorset, Vermont. This is in 1917. So he's about 22 years old. He's in that range. Oh, maybe he was younger. You know what? This is probably a little before that. He might be about 20 years old here, 19, 20, somewhere in that range. Yeah.
About 19 or 20 years old. Yeah, that's good information then. Now let's go back to this tombstone, right? Here lies a Hampshire grenadier who caught his death drinking cold small beer. A good soldier is near forgot whether he dieth by musket or pot. Now you notice that in the top it called this thing a Doggerel, doggle. That means like scribble, and it basically means BS. And what this is saying is, if you're a good soldier, it doesn't matter if you die by getting shot or you drink yourself to death. That is the worst. That is just the worst thing to tell somebody, you know, that you're still a good soldier, whether you drink yourself to death or you get killed in battle. So that was the beginning of Bill just reading some BS on the wall, you know.
Well, yeah. And the irony here is this guy's a grenadier. That's someone that handles grenades. These are highly explosive, deadly things. He's at war handling grenades, fighting life and death. And what kills him, he dies from a cold, small beer. That's the irony of it. And where it says by pot, that's referring to a pot of beer. So yeah, it's beer. So just a cold, small, he drank himself to death. In spite of, you know, what he did with the war was really dangerous, and this is what killed him. That's the irony.
Yeah, the thing about it is that we can be strong and mighty people, and alcohol can take us down when nothing else could. Isn't that something? You know? So, yeah. Now let's go on. It says, ominous warning, which I failed to heed. 22. Oh, he does tell us. Wow, where'd we miss that? 22 and a veteran of foreign wars. I went home at last. I fancied myself a leader, for had I not the men of my battery given me a special token of approval? Question. My talent for leadership, I imagine, would place me at the head of vast enterprises, which I would manage with the utmost assurance. I took a night law course and obtained employment as an investigator for a surety company. The drive for success was on. I proved to the world I was important. My work took me about Wall Street, and little by little, I became interested in the market. Many people lost money, but some became very rich. Why not I? I studied economics and business as well as law. Potential alcoholic that I was, I nearly failed my law course. At one of the finals, I was too drunk to think or write. Though my drinking was not yet continuous, it disturbed my wife. We had long talks we had long talks, and I would still her forbiddings by telling her that men of great genius conceive their best projects when drunk, that the most majestic constructions of philosophical thought were so derived. Wow. By the time I had completed the course, I knew that law was not for me. The inviting maelstroms of Wall Street had me in its grips. Business and financial leaders were my heroes. Out of this alley of drink and speculation, I commenced to forge the weapon that one day would turn its flight like a boomerang and all but cut me to ribbons. Living moderately, my wife and I saved $1,000 and went into certain securities, then cheap and rather unpopular. I rightly imagined that they would someday have a great rise. I failed to persuade my broker friends to send me out looking over the factories and managements, but my wife and I decided to go anyway. I had developed a theory that most people lost money in stocks through ignorance of the markets. I discovered many more reasons later on. We gave up our positions and off we roared on a motorcycle, the sidecar stuffed with tent, blankets, and a change of clothes, and 3 used volumes of a financial reference service.
Okay, hold it right there, cousin. Cousin, I'm going to share the screen here. I'm going to show you guys what they looked like and put this together for you so you can see. Check this out.
Oh, you got that picture, right?
Yeah, I got a picture. So here, hold on. Let me go to share. Yeah, wait till you see this. This is what it looks like. It's unbelievable. You're going to laugh. Okay. So here they are. That's that thing. They got that thing packed to the gills. She's in the little sidecar. Look at all that stuff. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, they were not playing. They were not playing. They were serious, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And looking at that, right? And then the next line is, our friends thought a lunacy commission should be appointed. Perhaps they were right. Wow, what perfect timing for showing that picture, huh?
Yeah.
He said, I had some success in speculations, so we had a little money. But we once worked on a farm for a month to avoid drawing on our small capital. That was the last honest manual labor on my part for many a day. We covered the whole eastern United States in a year. At the end of my reports to Wall Street, it procured me a position there, and I used a large expense account. The exercise of an option brought in more money, leaving us with a profit of several $1,000s for that year. The next few years, fortune threw money and applause my way. I had arrived. That is a term that you hear in AA. We had arrived, and we felt like we were as good as we were going to get, and we could handle anything that was going to come our way. All right, it says that my judgment and my ideas were followed by many to the tune of paper millions. The great boom of the late 20s was seething and swelling. Drink was taking an important and exhilarating part in my life. There were loud talks in the jazz places uptown. Everyone spent in thousands and chatted in millions. Scoffers could scoff and be damned. I made a host of fair weather friends.
So hold on, cousin. Elise was asking if she could come in and ask a question, and I said,
"Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, please
go
come
ahead.
on in, Elise."
Oh,
yeah.
That's okay.
Or maybe even answer a question. Maybe you know something about this.
Yes.
My question was about the first section. So keep going, and maybe I'll hold that for after we're done here.
Okay. Well, he says that he met a host of fair weather friends, don't we all? My drinking assumed more serious proportion, continuing all day and almost every night. I can't even pronounce this word. What is it, Clyde?
It's remonstrances.
The remonstrances.
Yeah.
Let's look that up, man. Let's look that
It
up.
means disapproval, like
Oh,
strong disapproval. Yeah.
Strong disapproval. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Of my friends. Oh, I get it now. Terminated in a row, and I became a lone wolf. There were many unhappy scenes at our sumptuous apartment. There had been no real infidelity for loyalty to my wife. Helped me at times by my extreme drunkenness. That kept me out of those scrapes. In 1929, I contracted golf fever. All right, we're about 7 years into his drinking now, right?
Yeah, so he's covered a lot
Okay.
of ground here.
Yeah,
Yes.
we're about 7 years into his drinking. Remember, we started in 1922. We're in 1929 now.
Yeah.
So in 1929, I contracted golf fever. We went at once to the country. My wife applauded while I started out to overtake Walter Hagen. That was Michael Jordan back then of golf. Said liquor caught up with me much faster than I came up behind Walter. I began to be jittery in the morning, and golf permitted drinking every day and every night. It was fun to caroon around the exclusive golf course, which had inspired such awe in me as a lad. I acquired an impeccable coat of tan one sees upon the well-to-do. The local banker watched me whirl fat checks in and out of his till with amused skepticism. What do we think of all of that? Anyone?
Elise, do you have some comments?
I have a note from another meeting that golf permitted drinking equal to work.
Okay.
I don't know if that just meaning, I guess it means he was having fun.
Golf permitted drinking equal to work. Well,
Yeah.
I believe that a lot of, in the business that he was in, the stockbroker business, I think that a lot of business was conducted on the golf course too, right? We've heard that, right?
Going on when I was writing that thing.
Yeah, so every time it would be, if I'm a good drunk, every time that I want to have a meeting, why don't I just have it on the golf course? That's where I could drink. Where I could drink at the meeting.
Yeah. So yeah, and so Bill's he had arrived. Everything's going. He's got it all going on now. He's just happy as can be. He gets to drink every day and every night. He's making money as a stock speculator. He's playing golf every day, drinking. He's tan. Like he's ruling. Yeah, ruling his destiny. Life couldn't be better. He's like just the happiest guy in the world. Man, I got it made in the shade.
I like how I made a lot of fair weather friends, because don't we all have a lot of fair weather friends when we're drinking?
Yeah, Flacco, Black, Slim, that other guy that we don't really know his name. Remember him? We don't even know his name. We used to see him every day and drink with him every day, and we don't even know his name, And sure, they were our friends when we were doing well, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Well, Clyde, go ahead and tell us what happens next. Abruptly.
Okay. Yes, abruptly. Okay. In October 1929, hell broke loose on the New York Stock Exchange. After one of those days of inferno, I wobbled from a hotel bar to a brokerage office. It was 8 o'clock, 5 hours after the market closed. The tickers still clattered. I was staring at an inch of tape which bore the inscription XYZ-32. It had been 52 that morning. So if you had, 1,000 shares of that stuff, it was $52,000 in the morning and 32 in the afternoon. That's a pretty big hit, or You know, if it was 500,000 down to 300 just in one day, boom. It says, I was finished, and so were many friends. So now he's got a big problem. The papers reported men jumping to death from the towers of high finance. That disgusted me. I would not jump. I went back to the bar. My friends had dropped several million since 10 o'clock. So what? Tomorrow was another day. As I drank, here he is, he's drinking away. The old fierce determination to win came back. So that pumped him up with some confidence. He's drinking away. It's like, oh, it's okay. I'll make it all back. Next morning, I telephoned a friend in Montreal, and I looked. That guy's name, I think, was Dick Johnson. I looked it up. He had a friend in Montreal. He had plenty of money left and thought I had better go to Canada. So by the following spring, Bill and Lois were living in their accustomed style. They moved up there to Montreal and worked for this guy at some company. It's called Green Shields and Company. And so he and Lois were back on their feet. Said, I felt like Napoleon returning from Elba. No St. Helena for me. But here's the problem. Drinking caught up with me again. So he was putting his life back together and things were going well again. But drinking caught up with me again, and my generous friend had to let me go. This time we stayed broke. So his friend said, you got to go. So he wrecked it. His drinking is causing more and more trouble for him. It's getting progressively worse. Okay. So what do? They went to live with my wife's parents. That's Lois's parents. I found a job, then lost it as a result of a brawl with a taxi driver. So he got a job again. He's getting his life back together. And what does he do? He gets in a fight and gets fired again. Says, mercifully, no one could guess that I was to have no real employment for 5 years. So this is basically till he gets sober. Hardly draw a sober breath. This was like 1929 through 1934. He can't stay sober. He doesn't have a job. My wife began to work in a department store. So Lois got a job at a department store. I think it was a Macy's. Coming home exhausted to find me drunk. So he's not being a very good husband. He's drunk. His wife's going to work every day. I became an unwelcome hanger-on at brokerage places. So things are starting to unravel for Bill. He's swirling around the drain here. So liquor ceased to be a luxury. It became a necessity. Bathtub gin, 2 bottles a day, and often 3, got to be routine. So he's becoming more and more dependent on drinking more and more. His life is getting more and more unmanageable. He's really swirling the drain now. You can see how progressive this is. Sometimes a small deal would net a few $100s, and I would pay my bills at the bars and delicatessens. This went on endlessly, and I began to waken very early in the morning, shaking violently. A tumbler full of gin, followed by half a dozen bottles of beer, would be required if I were to eat any breakfast. Nevertheless, I still thought I could control the situation, and there were periods of sobriety which renewed my wife's hope. So he thought he could still get things under control using his own willpower and determination, and he would actually stay sober for brief periods. And that renewed. So Lois and he both thought, hey, great, maybe you can control this, Bill. Wow, this is great. But let's keep reading. Gradually, things got worse. Hello. The house was taken over by the mortgage holder. That's his mother-in-law's house, mother and father-in-law. His mother-in-law died. Lois's mom died. My wife and father-in-law became ill. So they lose the house in foreclosure. Lois's mom dies, and Lois and her dad become really sick. So then Bill gets a promising business opportunity. Stocks were at the low point of 1932. This is 3 years after the crash. And I had somehow formed a group to buy. So he was a really good salesman. He convinced his group that, hey, I've got this awesome investment. Let's pool our money. I'll make you guys rich. And he was able to convince them. He was a very good salesman. And he was to share generously in the profits. So everything's going great. Then what happened? I went on a prodigious bender and that chance vanished. So his drinking spoiled an opportunity to make those investors money and himself money. So here he continues. He says, I woke up. This had to be stopped. He realizes this can't go on. He said, I saw I could not take so much as one drink. He knew he had to avoid that first sucker drink. So he decided, I was through forever. He said, before then, I had written lots of sweet promises, but my wife happily observed that this time I meant business. And so I did. So he really, really means it. He is going to pour on the willpower like you have never seen before. He is determined. He is going to stop this time. It's going to work this time. And Lois is saying, yes, yes, Bill, you can do this. Well, let's keep reading. Shortly afterward, I came home drunk. Surprise, surprise. Unbelievable. There had been no fight. Where had been my high resolve? I simply didn't know. It hadn't even come to mind. Someone had pushed a drink my way, and I had taken it. Was I crazy? I began to wonder, for such an appalling lack of perspective seemed near being just that. What do you guys think of all that?
Well, Clyde, what I heard is, and you guys have told me this, that Bill Wilson, like me, I knew I was an alcoholic and I really wanted to quit. I knew I was an alcoholic and I really wanted to quit, but yet I kept drinking. Isn't that something? I knew he was an alcoholic and he really wanted to quit, but that's not enough. That's not enough, obviously.
No. Can you relate to that, Elise? Are you following along with this? Have you had this experience too?
Oh yeah, for sure. It's very familiar, and I just love how it demonstrates the progressiveness of the disease and how you're just like self-will can make it work. You just believe it. Self-will, I can make it happen, and every time it fails. And so, yeah, I'm on day 8 for number 2. I was sober for a year and a half. So yeah, I can believe it.
Welcome. Yeah, you are in the right place, Elise. Thank you for joining us. So I'll go ahead and continue here reading. See how Bill does what he does from this point. He says, renewing my resolve, I tried again. He's going to do it again, by golly.
I couldn't help but laugh when you said that.
Yeah, he's going to
Sounds
try
so
again.
much like me. Yeah,
yep.
Renewing my resolve.
Yeah, he's
the same way I did last time.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, I love it.
Yeah, so get this though. Here's what happens, and this is the whole reservation thing too. It says some time passed and confidence began to be replaced by cocksureness. He said, I could laugh at the gin mills. Now I had what it takes. So he was actually able, through his resolve, to stay sober for some period of time. And so he went from being confident to being absolutely cocksure. That means I did it this time. I'm done. I'll never drink again. I can laugh at the gin mills. Now I've got what it takes. I did it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, guess what? One day I walked into a cafe to telephone. In no time, I was beating on the bar, asking myself how it happened. As the whiskey rose to my head, I told myself I would manage better next time. but I might as well get good and drunk then. And I
Stop
did.
right there.
Yeah.
That's what we call the fuckers.
Yes. That's right.
That's a perfect example of the efforts right there.
That is
Hey,
right.
look, I might as wait. Listen, I done came this far. I might as well go all the way. You know, might as well go
Exactly.
all the way. Give it all I've got. You know, wow,
Yeah.
perfect example of the efforts right there. How
Big
many of us have had those before? I know.
Oh yeah. Guilty.
Yeah. Well,
For
I just
sure.
have one. You know, F it. I'm going
Yeah.
all in. You know.
Yes. So here it's getting worse and worse for this poor guy. Says the remorse, horror, and hopelessness of the next morning are unforgettable. The courage to do battle was not there. My brain raced uncontrollably, and there was a terrible sense of impending calamity. That's because he knew, he had a serious problem and he couldn't stop it. I hardly dared cross the street lest I collapse and be run down by an early morning truck, for it was scarcely daylight. An all-night place supplied me with a dozen glasses of ale. My writhing nerves were stilled at last. A morning paper told me the market had gone to hell again. Well, so had I. The market would recover, but I wouldn't. That was a hard thought. Should I kill myself? Now he's thinking about suicide. No, not now. Then a mental fog settled down. Gin would fix that. So 2 bottles and oblivion. So he is really up against it now. He's struggling bad. And here it tells us the mind and body are marvelous mechanisms, for mine endured this agony 2 more years. So he's still going on and on here. This would have been in 1932 because he got sober in 1934. So sometimes I stole from my wife's slender purse when the morning terror and madness were on me. Again, I swayed dizzily before an open window or the medicine cabinet where there was poison, cursing myself for a weakling. He's really disappointed in himself. His willpower isn't working against this problem. There were flights from city to country and back as my wife and I sought escape. Then came the night when the physical and mental torture was so hellish, I feared I would burst through my window, sash and all. So he's worried about committing suicide here. Somehow, I managed to drag my mattress to a lower floor lest I suddenly leap. A doctor came with a heavy sedative. Next day, found me drinking both gin and sedative. So talk about progressive. Now he's not only drinking hard alcohol gin, he's taking sedatives also. This combination soon landed me on the rocks. People feared for my sanity. So did I. I could eat little or nothing when drinking, and I was 40 pounds underweight. So he's really sick, physically and mentally, suffering bad. So next, my brother-in-law is a physician. So this would be Lois's brother, is a physician, and through his kindness and that of my mother, and so Bill's mom and Lois's brother, the physician, placed him in a nationally known hospital for the mental and physical rehabilitation of alcoholics. That's the Towns Hospital, the Charles B. Towns Hospital in New York. So they checked him in to this hospital. Under the so-called belladonna treatment, my brain cleared. So that was some cousin. What was this belladonna stuff all about?
Yeah. First off, it tells us how serious this thing had gotten because the family could no longer look on and just mind their business anymore. His mother, it says his mother came to help him. She's all the way up in Vermont. She came all the way down to the city to help him. And of course, Lois's brother, the doctor, who, by the way, introduced he introduced her to Bill. But look who's coming to dinner. He's the one. Lois's brother introduced them.
Uh-huh.
That shit is crazy. And then it goes on to talk about this belladonna treatment, and I had to look that up. And they knew very little about how to treat alcoholics back then in the 1930s, and they would get them in the hospital and give them this concoction to clean you out. Actually, what they thought was that if you got cleaned up, that you and got your head cleared a little bit, that you wouldn't drink anymore, and they thought that it was a matter of willpower. So they had this stuff. It was nightshade. They'd put it in a liquid, all kinds of stuff. It was nightshade, poison. And what it would do was it would have everything coming out of every hole in you at once. Check that out. You'd be shitting, vomiting, and everything else. And then when you finish that, you get it, you're all dried out now. So you got no reason to drink anymore. This is what they would believe. You got no reason to drink anymore. And the thing about it is, if the person who was administering it to you didn't know what they were doing, this stuff could kill you. This stuff could kill you. You could go into what they call that? What epileptic? You could
A seizure.
Yeah, you could go into seizures and not come back from it. Never come back from it. Yeah, Google it yourself. When I Googled, I said, this is some nasty stuff. It was nightshade. It was nightshade. Just a concoction. They give it to you every couple of hours, have you sip on it every couple of hours. And as you're sipping, everything's coming out of you. So they think that we're making progress here. We're getting them clean. We're getting them. They call home and be able to say, yeah, we got them all cleaned up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, at the
So,
time, yeah, that's all they had. It's the only solution
Yeah.
they could offer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So it says so his brain cleared according to this system, this belladonna crap they gave him. And then it says hydrotherapy, that's water therapy, and mild exercise helped much. So they're trying to physically get him back into shape.
Yeah, so whirlpools, mild exercise, all of that does help,
Yeah. And so here's the best part. Best of all, I met a kind doctor who explained that though certainly selfish and foolish, I had been seriously ill, bodily and mentally. Now remember, that's Dr. Silkworth, who wrote the doctor's opinion, and he mentions that this alcoholism thing affects us bodily and mentally. He's the one that brought up this whole concept for the first time in history, that alcoholism is a disease and it affects our body as well as our mind. He painted the complete picture. He was the first one to do that, bodily and mentally. So here's what Bill said about that. He said, it relieved me somewhat to learn that in alcoholics, the will is amazingly weakened when it comes to combating liquor, though it often remains strong in other respects. So now Bill feels a little better about himself. He's like, well, so I do have good willpower and resolve and determination on work matters and other life issues, but with alcohol, it doesn't exist for me. So he said, my incredible behavior in the face of a desperate desire to stop was explained. So Dr. Silkworth explained to Bill what was going on. He's being armed with the facts about alcoholism. So understanding myself now, I fared forth in high hope. So now he has a better understanding of himself. So now he feels like he can solve the problem, right? For 3 or 4 months, the goose hung high. He said, I went to town regularly and even made a little money. Surely this was the answer. Self-knowledge. So he figured, okay, the doctor explained to me what's going on. Now I've got it figured out. I'll fix it. I can do this now. That's what he was thinking. Self-knowledge.
And you know something, Clyde, and we want to make it clear. Yeah, and I believe that too. And that is definitely not that is definitely not why we're studying this book here today for self-knowledge. We're studying this book because we want to continue to have spiritual experiences through this book, you know? And so, yeah, we need to know that. That is not why we're studying this book. We're looking for a new spirit. We're looking for a new and a better spiritual experience every time we sit down and interact like this, you know? Yeah. So
yeah, and the moral of this story is that self-knowledge won't solve our problem, because listen to what happens next. It says, he said, surely this was the answer, self-knowledge. He says, but it was not. For the frightful day came when I drank once more. The curve of my declining moral and bodily health fell off like a ski jump. So he really plummeted after this bout. Says, after a time, I returned to the hospital. So he's going back to the town's hospital. He says, this was the finish.
Hey, Clyde, call it what it is. Back to detox, man. Back to detox.
Yeah, back to detox. That's it. That's it.
Speak English.
Yes. He went back to detox. And so he just figured this was the finish, the curtain, it seemed to me. So here's what the doctors told Lois. My weary and despairing wife was informed that it would all end with heart failure during delirium tremens, or I would develop a wet brain, perhaps within a year. She would soon have to give me over to the undertaker or the asylum. That's a pretty grave diagnosis, and that's what they declared for Bill. They just said, look, you are done. Lois, your husband is a dead man walking. He doesn't have much time left. He's either his heart's going to fail during DTs, or he's going to get a wet brain. He's going to go to the insane asylum or the morgue, one of the two.
Well, that's the same thing. I can identify with that. My family was scared to death that I was going to kill myself or die or get sick and die from if I kept on drinking and drugging, man. You know, so yeah, and I know that my wife felt the same way. You know.
So yeah, we're getting a really clear picture of how this disease of alcoholism affects people, ourselves included. I mean, it is really hardcore stuff we're dealing with here. It's deadly, progressive, it's incurable, and it's deadly.
And look at look at how serious this thing is. It's like it says that that she would develop, that he would develop, but it says that she would soon have to give me over to the undertaker or the asylum. It sounds like you're talking about somebody who's got liver disease, cancer, or some shit like this. This is alcoholism. You know, this is like somebody who's, you're talking about, somebody who's got a heart problem, somebody with something else going on, not alcoholism. That in other words, they got 6 months to live or so, So that's how deadly this thing can get.
Yeah, exactly right, cousin. So here's what it says.
I think that every good alcoholic, for real, and this is not a joke, I think that every good alcoholic, if we care anything about our family, we need to buy some life insurance. For real. I don't care how good your sobriety is. I mean, normal people buy it because they care about their family. I think the alcoholics, we should get it when we get out of detox. That should be something that they give you a fucking $10,000 license, a burial policy at least, when you come out of detox, because that's how serious this thing is. You know how many of us leave our families footing the bill because of our drinking? Yeah, I'm serious. I brought one for real. When I got serious and really seen how serious this thing was, I bought life insurance policy, and I'm sober. But fucking just in case, suppose I went out and drank and fucking and died, OD'd or something, just left everybody hanging trying to find 10 grand to put me in a hole. No, I got life insurance.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I looked up the word wet brain, because I just thought, well, it must mean, a psychology issue, but it is a severe vitamin B1 deficiency due to alcoholism or malnutrition. And I thought that is interesting. I don't know if it's true or not, but as you're drinking, there's so many things that are ruined, but you're literally ruining your body's nutrition and depriving your body of the things that it needs, which will kill you just from a physical aspect. And that's horrible.
Yeah.
I mean, because alcoholics think, at least I think, well, it's 1 hour in your system, and then it gets out, and then you have one more, and another hour, and it's cycling through. So you don't really think about the true physical issues.
Where'd we hear that? At the bar?
Yeah, of course. That's not true.
Okay. So here's what Bill said about this undertaker or asylum. He said, they did not need to tell me. I knew and almost welcomed the idea. Almost brings me to tears, the poor guy. I can relate. I was there. I was so desperate and hopeless. I just couldn't see any way out. I was absolutely, I almost welcomed the idea of going to bed and not waking up in the morning. I was that miserable. And that's how Bill is here. He just, it's like almost welcomed the idea. It was a devastating blow to my pride. I, who had thought so well of myself and my abilities, of my capacity to surmount obstacles, was cornered at last. Says now I was to plunge into the dark, joining that endless procession of sots who had gone on before. I thought of my poor wife. There had been much happiness after all. What would I not give to make amends? But that was over now. Man, I'm almost crying right now. I felt the same way, felt the exact same way. No words can tell of the loneliness and despair I found in that bitter morass of self-pity. Quicksand stretched around me in all directions. I had met my match. I had been overwhelmed. Alcohol was my master.
Step one.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that something? Aren't we glad this happened? Aren't we glad this happened? Clyde, and I'm reading this with you, and yeah, I feel it too, man. And as crazy as it sounds, I had to want to jump out the window in order to take the fucking steps. Isn't that something?
Yeah. Yeah,
I had to want to jump out the window in order to take the steps.
Yep. That's because you were feeling the loneliness and this despair, the bitter morass of self-pity. You had quicksand stretched around you in all directions. That was your solution.
I couldn't see any way out. I couldn't see any way out without a bottle in a bag, And my first step experience. This is his first step experience, and so was it like mine. And at least if you don't know, my first step experience was I had came out of the hospital, and I was sober about 3 weeks, trying to do it on my own, and I just couldn't take it. I started really losing it, and I came up with an idea that I was going to jump out of a second floor window to break my leg, so that my family would feel sorry for me, and then I could drink and drug the way that I wanted to. That was a real idea in my head, Yeah. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to kill myself. I wanted to freaking get high.
Yeah.
And I didn't have the balls just to take a 20 and go to the liquor store. So I said, I'll jump out the window and everybody will feel sorry for me. I had gotten that sick, that weak, and that stupid, and that's my first step experience. And I need not ever forget that. But God has a sense of humor. Now I'm on the seventh floor.
Thank you for sharing.
Okay. So yeah, that's Bill's first step experience there. I mean, it went on and on and on, and that's where it culminated right there. He was at that's it. So there's a little more though. He says, trembling, I stepped from the hospital a broken man. Says, fear sobered me for a bit. So he was so scared, he stayed sober for a little bit. Then came the insidious insanity of that first drink. And on Armistice Day, 1934, that's when World War I ended on November 12th, 1934. I was off again. So he succumbed to the desire again. Everyone became resigned to the certainty that I would have to be shut up somewhere or would stumble along to a miserable end. How dark it is before the dawn. It says, in reality, that was the beginning of my last debauch. I was soon to be catapulted into what I like to call the fourth dimension of existence. I was to know happiness, peace, and usefulness in a way of life that is incredibly more wonderful as time passes. So this is the end of his step one experience, and he's coming in to realize he's still gonna drink, but he's nearing, it's the dark before the dawn, finally, for
Well, you
him.
can't forget Clyde. He hasn't met Ebby yet. So what we're going to read now over these next few pages is how quickly Bill went through the steps and accepted the program. And I just want to go back to that Amicus Day, because that always just threw me for a loop, and I had to look that up. And that is what we call Veterans Day today. That's Veterans Day. That's Veterans Day. Amicus Day. I was like, Amicus Day, what is it? And I knew it was the end of the war, but then when I Googled it, it said that is our today's Veterans Day. You know, Amethyst Day.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, so
why not go out and drink? I'm a veteran. That's what he said. It's Veterans Day. It's Veterans Day, and I'm a veteran. Hey,
yeah,
who could blame me, right? Who could blame me?
I kind of about it as I know I've been guilty lots of times. Well, I'm going to drink when I celebrate because I can celebrate, and we should be celebrating and drinking, and it just doesn't make any sense, because then you fall back into it because you took that first drink.
That first drink. First drink kills us every time.
Okay, so here's what happens. He says, near the end of that bleak November, I sat drinking in my kitchen. So Bill's sitting in his kitchen, he's drinking. With a certain satisfaction, I reflected there was enough gin concealed about the house to carry me through that night and the next day. So he's sitting there, he's got a buzz on, he's satisfied because he knows he's got enough to hold him over through the night and the whole next day. He's got plenty of supply, so he's feeling okay. My wife was at work, so Lois is at work. I wondered whether I dared hide a full bottle of gin near the head of our bed. I would need it before daylight. So he's trying to plan how he's going to drink in the middle of the night. He's going to need a drink. And he's trying to figure out where to stash that bottle. And he's thinking, I wonder if I put it up here by the head of the bed so I can easily grab it in the middle of the night. Lois might find it. So here's what happened. And this is the beginning of the divine intervention of God here. My musing was interrupted by the telephone. So Bill's sitting there, he's thinking this through. The phone rings. The cheery voice of an old school friend asked if he might come over. So somebody calls and says, hey, Bill, I want to come over. And he was sober. It was years since I could remember his coming to New York in that condition. So Bill's talking about his old drinking buddy, Ebby Thatcher, okay? And Ebby and Bill know each other real well. Ebby is an out of control drinker, just like Bill, big trouble. So Ebby calls and says he wants to come over, and Bill says in italics, he was sober. That means for emphasis. So Bill says, I was amazed. Rumor had it that he had been committed for alcoholic insanity. So he thought he thought Ebby was in the insane asylum. I wondered how he had escaped. It's like, how the hell did Ebby get out of the insane asylum? So, of course, he would have dinner and then I could drink openly with him. So Bill's thinking, yeah, I'll have Ebby come over, we'll have a nice dinner, and then we'll get drunk together. This will be great. He escaped from the insane asylum. Can't wait to talk to him and get drink with him. So, unmindful of his welfare, so Bill didn't realize Ebby was sober. He said, or how well he was doing. He said, I thought only, oh, wait, unmindful of his welfare, meaning I didn't care about, whether he was sober or not. He said, I thought only of recapturing the spirit of other days. So he wanted to be sure Ebby came over and would drink with him. There was that time we had chartered an airplane to complete a jag. His coming was an oasis in this dreary desert of futility, the very thing, an oasis. Drinkers are like that. So Bill's really excited. Ebby's going to come over. We're going to have a nice dinner. We're going to drink together, just like the good old days. Oh, I can't wait. This is going to be great. So here's what happened. The door opened and he stood there. That's Ebby, fresh-skinned and glowing. There was something about his eyes. He was inexplicably different. What had happened? So Bill's looking at this guy like, whoa, something's going on here. What happened to Ebby? He looks different. There's something different about this guy. So Bill, he pushes a drink across the table, like, here you go, Ebby. And what did Ebby do? He refused it. Disappointed but curious, I wondered what had gotten into the fellow. He wasn't himself. So Bill's scratching his head. He's like, what the heck's going on here? I just pushed a drink across the table and Ebby isn't drinking it? What's going on? So he says, come, what's this all about? I queried. So Ebby, he looked straight at me. Simply but smilingly, he said, I've got religion. So Bill, I was aghast. He said, so that was it. Last summer, an alcoholic crackpot. Now I suspected a little cracked about religion. He had that starry-eyed look. Yes, the old boy was on fire, all right, but bless his heart, let him rant. Besides, my gin would last longer than his preaching. So Bill thought, okay, yeah, you're going to be preaching to me about religion. I got lots of gin. Bring it on, Ebby. Let's hear about it. I can sit here all night with this much gin. Go ahead. So that's what Bill was thinking. And so here's what happened, though. But he did no ranting. In a matter-of-fact way, he told how two men had appeared in court, persuading the judge to suspend his commitment. So this was Roland Hazard was one of the guys, the Hazard family and the Thatcher family. So Ebby had gotten trouble in Vermont for shooting a gun at some birds. He got drunk and he was shooting the neighbor's house, the birds on the eaves at the neighbor's house or something. And so he had to go to court up there as a result of his drunkenness. And Roland Hazard was one of his friends, and Roland's dad, I think, was a judge. Is that right, Cuzin? Was the judge?
I think the friend, Roland Hazard's friend, the other friend's father was a judge, I think, and they were already members of the Oxford group. They were already with the Oxford group.
Right. So what Ebby's talking about is when he went to court for this shooting incident, these other friends had the judge suspend his commitment. And so they told Ebby of this simple religious idea. These are a couple sober guys that got sober, Roland Hazard and another guy that got sober using the Oxford group technique, their spiritual program of steps and spiritual awakening. And so They told him of a simple religious idea, practical program of action. So Ebby says that was 2 months ago, and the result was self-evident. It worked. So Ebby got sober using this Oxford group technique. That's what happened. So here's what he did. Bill says he had come to pass his experience along to me if I cared to have it. So Bill said I was shocked, but interested. Certainly I was interested. I had to be, for I was hopeless. So that's where Bill's at with this whole Ebby thing. He's thinking, I'm not a big fan of this religious stuff, but Ebby got sober and he's telling me how he did it. And maybe I should, I'm desperate. I'm hopeless. Maybe I'll listen and see what he's offering here, how he's going to explain this to me and what it's like and what he did and how it worked and all that kind of stuff. So he says he talked for hours. Childhood memories rose before me. I could almost hear the sound of the preacher's voice as I sat on still Sundays way over there on the hillside. There was that proffered temperance pledge I never signed. My grandfather's good-natured contempt of some church folk and their doings. His insistence that the spheres really had their music, but his denial of the preacher's right to tell him how he must listen. His fearlessness as he spoke of these things just before he died. These recollections welled up from the past. They made me swallow hard. So Bill's just going through in his head his opinion on organized religion. And so Bill is talking about his grandfather. That's because his dad and his mom got divorced when he was young. And I think his grandfather was really the one that raised him. And his grandfather ingrained these ideas in Bill's head about organized religion. And that's what he's rehearsing this stuff in his head. Because Abby's talking about this religious program.
You froze up, Clyde. Okay. He'll be back. All right, yeah. And it says that wartime day in old Winchester Cathedral came back to me. I had always believed in a power greater than myself. I had often pondered these things. I was not an atheist. What's an atheist, Clyde?
An atheist doesn't believe in God.
Okay. Few people really are. For that means blind faith in a strange proposition that this universe originated in a cipher and aimlessly rushes nowhere. My intellectual heroes, the chemists, the astronomers, even the evolutionists, suggest vast laws and forces at work. Despite contrary indications, I had little doubt that a mighty purpose and rhythm underlay all. How could there be so much precise and immutable law and no intelligence? I simply had to believe in the spirit of the universe, who knew neither time nor limitation, but that was as far as I had gone. With ministers and the world's religions, I parted right there. When they talked of God personal to me, who was love, superhuman strength and direction, I became irritated and my mind snapped shut against such a theory. To Christ, I conceded the certainty of a great man, not too closely followed by those who claimed him. His moral teachings, most excellent. For myself, I had adopted those parts which seemed convenient and not too difficult. The rest I disregarded. Me too. The wars which had been fought, the burnings and chicanery that religious dispute had facilitated made me sick. I honestly doubted whether, on balance, the religions of mankind had done any good. Judging from what I had seen in Europe, and since the power of God in human affairs was negotiable, the brotherhood of man was a grim jest. If there was a devil, he seemed to be boss of the universe, and he certainly had me. And he goes on. Now, that right there is just, that's Bill thinking out loud about his spiritual and religious beliefs. You know, he's thinking out loud. So then he says, but my friend sat before me, and he made a point-blank declaration that God had done for him what he could not do for himself. His human will had failed. Doctors pronounced him incurable. Society was about to lock him up. Like myself, he had admitted complete defeat. Step one.
Okay, let's stop right there. He's just, Bill's pointing out that, hey, he went through the exact same, he had the same first step experience I had. I can relate 100% to this guy. And he just made a point blank declaration to me that God fixed his problem. And so Bill's following along carefully and closely with what Ebby's telling him.
And then he admits, like myself, he had admitted complete defeat. Step one.
Yep.
Then he had in effect been raised from the dead, suddenly taken from the scrap heap to a level of life better than the best he had ever known. Had this power originated in him? That's a question. Obviously, it had not. There had been no more power in him than there was in me at that minute. And that was none at all. I'm powerless. He's admitting that he's powerless. Says that floored me. It began to look as though religious people were right after all. I want to stop right there, because if you got your book in front of you and you got your note, this is the first step that Bill went through in the big book, where he said, like myself, he had admitted complete defeat. So that means that Bill, had admitted complete defeat. And had there been any more power in him than there was in me? No, not at that moment. We both needed a power greater than ourselves. The power is not in us right now. Does everybody get that? Make sense?
Steps 1 and 2.
So you would put step 1 and 2 there, you know?
Yep.
Okay, and then it says that floored me. It began to look as though religious people were right after all. Here was something at work in a human heart which had done the impossible. My ideas about miracles were drastically revised right then. Never mind the musty past. That's the stuff that he was talking about on page 10 and the top of 11. Never mind the musty past. Here sat a miracle directly across the kitchen table. He shouted good tidings. I saw that my friend was more than inwardly. I saw that my friend was much more than inwardly recognized. He was on a different footing. His roots grasped new soil. Despite the living example of my friend, there remained in me the vestiges. How do you pronounce that, Clyde?
Vestiges. I think that
vestiges. Vestiges of old prejudice. The word God still arouses a certain antipathy. Antipathy. Wow, Bill with these words. When the thought was expressed that there might be a God personal to me, this feeling was intensified. I didn't like the idea. I could go for such concepts as creative intelligence, universal mind, spirit of nature, but I resisted the thought of a czar of the heavens, however loving his sway might be. I have since talked with scores of men who felt the same way. My friend suggested what seemed to be a novel idea. He said, why don't you choose your own conception of God? Question. Bill responded. He says to himself, that statement hit me hard. It melted the icy intellectual mountain in whose shadow I had lived and shivered for years. I stood in the sunlight at last. It was only a matter of being willing to believe in a power greater than myself. Nothing more was required. And so it is still today. Let's read that again. It was only a matter of willing to believe in a power greater than myself. Nothing more was required of me to make a beginning. Second step.
Yeah, that's it.
And it tells us in our literature that as soon as a man can answer this question, if he's willing to believe, if he does believe, or you're willing to believe in a power greater than yourself, then we can assure him that he's on his way. You know,
Yeah.
it can be this simple, you know. Go ahead, Clyde. Anything you want to say there or read some
Yeah.
more?
Yeah, I just want to say, so Bill spent a lot of time there explaining on page 10, page 11, and page 12. 3 pages of why he is not going to buy into this organized God of organized religion. But he does say that I do believe there is some higher power, that there has to be. And so he's struggling with this really hard. He wrote 3 pages about it, and he's talking to Ebby about it. And Ebby finally says, hey, you know what, Bill? Instead of trying to use the God that's been forced on you that you have such a problem with of organized religion, just choose your own conception of God. And that's what opened the door for Bill. That is what unlocked the key. That was the key for Bill to see the light and realize. That's what melted that icy intellectual mountain. He was shivering in it, and he was finally in the sunlight. And regarding this italics, only a matter of being willing to believe in a power greater than myself, nothing more was required for me to make my beginning. I saw that growth could start from that point. Upon a foundation of complete willingness, I might build what I saw in my friend. Would I have it? Of course I would. And that's exactly what the second step says in the chapter 4, We Agnostics, on page 47. That is the second step right there. That's Bill explaining it to us. We just ask ourselves one short question. Do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe that there's a power greater than myself? And as long as you can say, yes, I believe, or I'm willing to believe, they emphatically assure us that we are on our way. So, yeah, that was Bill's second step right there. Really opened the door. So, and that's about all the time we have for today, too. Do you have any comments on this second step experience and Bill's, you know, the power greater than himself that he has? Yeah.
This clearly shows me that I can take the second step anytime, anywhere. Anytime, anywhere. It says that it's only a matter of believing or being willing to believe. That could happen at any time. You know, that could actually happen your first day sober. You know, that you believe or are willing to believe that there's a power greater than yourself. And this is a perfect place to stop, and we'll pick up next week, and we'll see. Next week we'll see where Bill goes through the steps, and it's only a few pages. It's only a few pages. You know, it's on page 11 through what 14, right, Clyde? 11 through 14.
Yeah. Yeah.
We really see where he went through the steps. And this
Yeah.
is something that I often try to show people when I sit down with them. This is one of the first things I try to show them, you know, is how simply Bill went through the steps and how quickly he went through the steps, you know, and we show it to them in the book, you know, and hopefully that helps them and encourages them and lets them know that they can do it too, you know. So that's that. All right, it's been a great study today. And we'll pick up next week, same bat time, same bat channel. We'll be back here at 2 p.m. And in between time and in the meantime, we'll be trusting God, cleaning house, and helping others along the way. And we'll be doing it all over the place, especially in our Zoo Crew room where we have 18 meetings a day. And you could go to our website at thezooCrew.org, you know. So let's close this out with the Serenity Prayer. First, I gotta just read this here. Get this up here. Just give me 1 second.
Keep the recording. Keep the recording on. Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. I'm gonna read the outro now.
Okay.
Just my page just went a little wacky.
Okay.
So this is how we end our podcast. And it is. Thank you everyone for coming to the Johnny and Clyde podcast, Big Book Study. We meet here every Sunday at 2 p.m. until 2 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. Eastern time in this room. The podcast will be available on this Friday. We do it on Sunday and it's available by Friday. Now, Big Book page 164. Our book is meant to be suggestive only. We realize that we know only a little. God will constantly disclose more to us. Ask him in your morning meditation what you could do each day for the man who is still sick. The answers will come if your own house is in order. But obviously, you cannot transmit something that you haven't got. See to it that your relationship with him is right, and great events will come to pass for you and countless others. This is a great fact to us. So abandon yourself to God as you understand him. Admit your faults to him and to your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past. Give freely what you find and join us, and we shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit. And you will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road of happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then. So let's close with the Lord's Prayer. Who woke us up this morning? Our Father,
who
which
art
art
in
in
heaven,
heaven, holy be thy
hallowed be thy
name.
name.
Thy kingdom come,
thy
will be done
on
on earth as it
as
is in heaven. Give us this
Give us
day
this
our daily
day
bread,
daily bread,
and forgive us our trespasses,
trespasses,
as we
as
forgive those who trespass against us.
against us.
And lead us
Lead
not
us
into
not into
temptation,
temptation,
but deliver us from evil.
evil.
For thine
For
is the
thine is
kingdom, the
and the
power,
and
and the
the
glory, forever
forever
and
and
ever.
ever.
Amen, amen,
Amen.
amen. Thank you all for coming out. We'll see you guys next week.
Thank you.
Okay.